Just realized I was muted. Sorry, everybody. Hi, welcome. I'm Allison McManus. I am the research director at the Freedom Initiative. Thank you all so much for joining. I am here today with my colleague Yusuf. We'll be hearing a little bit from him shortly. And we're so excited to welcome Ramy Shaath and Céline Lebrun-Shaath as well, who I'm sure you're all looking forward to hearing from. Ramy and Céline are human rights defenders and community organizers. They were based in Egypt for, Ramy most of his life and Céline for about a decade before they experienced a tragic ordeal whereby Ramy was jailed for over 900 days in wrongful detention, and Céline was deported from the country because of their activism and organizing. We're so fortunate that Ramy was released at the beginning of this year and so is able to join us here today. Of course, we were working with Céline throughout the campaign for Ramy's release because at the Freedom Initiative, that's what we do. Our mission is to advocate for political prisoners, raise awareness about their cases and about issues related to political detention, in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, and across the broader Middle East. And of course, we're here today to share some of that work with you and ask for your support in continuing that work moving forward. With that, I'll turn things over to Yusuf, who will talk a little bit more about the special Ramadan campaign that we've been doing. So over to you, Yusuf.
Sure. Thanks, Allison. So this Ramadan, we've been trying to highlight the treatment that prisoners receive during the month. There's a special cruelty that sort of comes with the families being arbitrarily separated during a time that for many is traditionally about togetherness. And then prison authorities often go out of their way to make this even worse. Detainees often don't receive their food on time if they're fasting. They don't receive nutritious food. It's exceptionally harder for families to visit their loved ones during this time. And when they are able to visit, visits are often cut short. The authorities go out of their way to make it harder for those engaging in the month to engage in worship. Books are denied. Qur'ans, they're denied from being able to pray. Even just this Ramadan, we've seen accounts of detainees going on hunger strike, which is especially dangerous during this time if they're fasting. Detainees being abused. We have a launch good set up as well, where we talk about this in further detail, and where if you'd like to go sort of support our work, you can go there and leave a donation. I think the link is available on our social medias. It's also across your screens right now. So after watching this, if you'd like to go there, read a little bit more about the Ramadan campaign and leave a donation, that would be very much appreciated.
So with that, why don't we welcome Céline and Ramy, since I know that's why everybody's here.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, Céline. Hi, Ramy.
Hello. Hi. How are you?
So Céline and Ramy, to start off, I think it would be nice if you guys could share a little bit about your story, and about the sort of fight to get Ramy out of detention.
Well, I'm ready, and thank you for having me. And I'm interested to meet your people and the people hearing us, and to keep the issue of detainees alive, and to hopefully end with or for release. Thousands of innocent Egyptians are still there, and it's a burden on us, and it's a burden on the country that's tearing it down with this atrocities still happening. We must end this, and I hope that's going to be my role and my aim and my objective.
Céline, can you talk to us a little bit more just about, the work that you did on Ramy's campaign while he was detained, and what were the steps that you took to coordinate around and mobilize communities around Ramy's liberation?
Sure. So the first thing was to decide to lead a campaign, a public campaign. That's the very first choice that all families must face, and not all the families decide to do that, especially families who are still in Egypt and who are afraid of the consequences that this could have on them. You have to know that in Egyptian jails, there are a lot of family members who are jailed. So the reprisals against families is something very, very widespread. I had the privilege, and it must be said, to be French, and I was deported at the time of Ramy's arrest, even though I was living in Egypt for the past 7 years. And this gave me the possibility to advocate from France for Ramy's release. There are family members in Egypt, and I'm thinking especially about Ala, Abdel Fattah's family, and others who are advocating from within in Egypt. So to go back to the steps, that was the very first step. And it took us 6 weeks before we made this decision. First, we tried, and especially through Ramy's father, who is a senior Palestinian diplomat, we tried the path of silent private diplomacy. Unfortunately, that didn't really work. And so 6 weeks later, after many promises, empty promises, we issued a statement. Obviously, all through these weeks, I had started reaching out to human rights organizations like Freedom Initiative, but Amnesty International as well, the Federation for International Human Rights. And I found in them the most precious support, because they guided me on what to do, who to contact, who to reach out, what are the first steps to follow in the face of a situation like this one. Then I started reaching out to lawmakers in France, being French, and France having a very strong strategic partnership with Egypt. So I met many lawmakers. I met the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but we also reached out to members of the US Congress with Ramy's family based in the US. Ramy has many family members in the US. So we started activating our network and really reaching out and knocking at all the doors we could. And yeah, that's, I think, a big lesson. Like, don't leave any door open. Just be willing, try everything. You don't know what can come out of it. Obviously, you need to be strategic because it's very draining and exhausting. And you need to build a team around you. And that I was grateful to find amazing people like Alison, who is here, and others. And so we had a team in the US, we had a team in France, we had a team at a point in the Arab world, even though it was a bit more difficult. But yeah, so it's being organized, structured, rely on other people because it's emotionally very hard as a family member. So not being alone is important.
Ramy, can you tell us a little bit about what the conditions were like for you when you were detained and how you were able to maintain communication with Céline?
Well, conditions were horrific. I spent, I mean, in addition to the first period of forced disappearance, then I went to Tora jail. I stayed in a room, a cell in Annex 3 with somewhere between 18 to 32 people in a 23 square meter room. Horrible conditions. I mean, we slept on the floor. We had a small bathroom with a hole and a shower as the whole thing for the whole people. Absolutely no medical care, very bad treatment of people, and much worse of families visiting, where the rules and regulations change every time, where sometimes they're allowed to meet, sometimes they're not, sometimes they allow their stuff in, sometimes they don't. With the use of the solitary confinement for the lamest and the smallest issues in a room of 1 meter by 1.5 meter, dark, with no windows, with no light, with a bucket for a toilet and a bottle of water for drinking, where I've seen a friend died in there because he couldn't take the place for a few days. With the whole attitude of officers that they are beyond the law, that there is no law really regulating us, that they realize you are a detainee of opinion, and you are not a terrorist, not a violent person in any way, but they know that they have the legitimacy, they have the immunity by the regime to and they tell you they have the ability to kill you, they have the ability to torture you, they have the ability to recycle you in other cases and keep you in jail indefinitely, and they have the ability to break the law in every and any way. And that was part of the fear tactics that been used against the Egyptian people before jail, in jail, and to people even after they leave, through fear tactics, through intimidation, through threats, and through other means. Yes, it has been a very tough experience, but very informative and very fulfilling. I've seen thousands of Egyptians from every corner of Egypt, from every social spectrum of Egypt, and from every ideology, and even a lot of people with none. It's important to realize that Egyptian jails represent Egyptian community and Egyptian people in every way. And for me, that was very fulfilling. The ability to resist your jail period, the ability to organize with people, the ability to keep talking in politics in a challenge to security, the ability to meet other people from other ideological specs, provoking security's attention and alert, the ability to fight them on every detail about your right and the rights of other people. So for me, 2.5 years of resistance inside jail, and I hope I can continue to resist and get everybody out. Definitely during my period, I was, first of all, I knew my wife will fight for me. You know, for the last few years, I've always asked her, what will you do when I get arrested? So, I mean, I have seen my friends being arrested one after the other. I knew that eventually they will reach me. And she's a fighter and she's a strong woman, and she did a marvelous job. Definitely in your jail, you don't get the details of what was happening. I had a monthly visit by my family. Of course, Céline was outside the country. And of course, the meeting with the family was 20 minutes once a month in the attendance of state security officers to intimidate you and to listen to what you're saying and to write every word you say and to censor it at points entering the discussion and saying, no, you cannot say that, or threats about part of the things you say. For example, at one point, I was telling my sister that when Corona started, that we have no vaccines, no treatments in any way, and 7 people died from Corona. So the officer looked at me and said, well, that would be spreading lies and rumors against the state. And I said, how is that so? He said, because we never tested the people. So how do you know it's COVID? So if you say it's COVID, then that would be spreading lies. Of course, the period and their condition was very clear. But yes, I was hearing what Céline was doing, at least the bigger moments, the moments where there was statements from legislative people, statements by NGOs, by freedom initiatives and others, statements by presidents when Macron said my name. But also I enjoyed at one point, Céline was able to send me a big list of and big number of letters that were sent to me by normal people that gave me a lot of emotional and psychological support. So yes, the support and the campaign Céline and NGOs like Freedom Initiatives did, that got the support of public and of lawmakers, was getting me first hope in jail. 2, it was giving me security because when your name is being talked about and the people are fighting for you, that makes it harder for officers to abuse or torture you. So that saved me a lot of abuse. And 3, finally, it led to my release. So yes, I definitely a full believer of organizing and campaigning and working together like Freedom Initiative to get people out.
For those who might be just joining us, we're here with Céline Lebrun-Shaath and Ramy Shaath, 2 wonderful human rights defenders, community organizers, and of course, Ramy was a political prisoner in Egypt for over 900 days. We do hope that this can be a discussion. So if anybody who's tuning in has any questions that they'd like to pose, we're more than happy to present those here. Feel free to put them in the chat on whatever platform you're in. Céline and Ramy, you were both organizers on the ground in Egypt. And of course, this is why you were specifically targeted. I'm wondering if you can reflect a little bit on how you're able to mobilize people on behalf of human rights, even under very difficult circumstances. As we know in Egypt, the civic space is heavily surveilled and repressed, but also how you conceive of mobilizing people for the cause of freedom and liberation in, say, France or the US, where people may be farther away from the problem. So would just love to hear some reflections on that.
Okay.
Well, there are always people willing to organize, even in difficult circumstances. We have to say, we were organizing on a very specific issue, which was Palestinian rights. And this historically has always been something tolerated in Egypt, even in some of the most repressive times under previous governments. So there was this idea when we were organizing that this is a matter of foreign policy, and Palestine is considered as a national cause in Egypt. And so as long as we're not criticizing the policies of the Egyptian regime very directly, we should be able to organize. And so when we launched the BDS movement in 2015, it was literally the biggest coalition for the defense of human rights in Egypt, with over 10 political parties, NGOs, syndicates, and over 100 of public figures. And we managed to work for a few years, for 5 years, and we were giving trainings to new members, very young people, every 2-3 months for, a few years. We were actually one of the most dynamic movements. And I think that eventually this is what started raising alarm, because at the end of the day, the current government is more repressive than any of the previous government, and it doesn't want any collective action. So, and we've seen, for example, even football fans have been repressed, even cultural places who were like bringing people, any place that gathers people, they don't want that. So, and we have to say also that 2019 was this whole period of the deal of the century, the Bahrain conference, and Egypt was participating in this discussion, and we couldn't but to address this. And I think this is what finally led to Ramy's arrest.
Let me add 2 small remarks. On a political scene, Egypt, unfortunately, the regime in Egypt, which is a continuation of the Mubarak regime, but bloodier and more aggressive, basically have learned the wrong lesson out of the 2011 revolution. People asked for freedom, for justice, for bread and life. And what he learned from that, well, there's activists who started this revolution, then we shoot, kill, arrest activists, that the Muslim movement, the Islamic movement was participating, so we destroy them, we confiscate their houses, we put them in jails forever till they die. That it was done through NGOs and human rights defenders, so we shut them down and we prevent their funding. That it was done through people talking and discussing and expressing through Facebook. So we completely monitor Facebook, shut down media in every way. So yes, the regime have learned the wrong lessons out of the revolution and started shutting down every small single space. I'll tell you a trick. All through, unfortunately, a lot of people in a lot of the new activists in Egypt were born, I call them born in 2011 after the revolution. Before the revolution, when Mubarak used to close completely the civic space, we used to work on 2 main issues. One, liberty, especially for detainees and people in jail unjustly. Second, the issue of Palestine. And those 2 issues always has the ability to gather people because they are right causes and there is unanimous support for the 2 causes in Egypt. And from those 2 causes, we regroup and organize to address the rest of the issue of the regime. So yes, when the civic space started shutting down by the end of 2014, we decided to split our groups into 2 movements. One, الحرية للجدعان, freedom for the people in jail, and 2, BDS movement to boycott Israel. With those 2 bases, we started regathering people around, along those 2 causes in a hope that eventually one day we can put them together and regroup into the bigger issue of rights, democracies, and positioning in Egypt.
We have a question from the audience. One of the viewers is asking, if you could talk a little bit about the circumstances around your release, and why and how you were forced to renounce your citizenship, and how that came about.
No, absolutely. There was absolutely no initiation, no interest from me. They have been telling me, actually, from very early on since my arrest, that whenever you will leave is gonna be through taking off your nationality. And I've always refused that, and I remained in. I mean, even the last year, they have sent indirect messages to me saying that the same thing, and I was always saying no, I will not release my nationality. Even at one point, I called on my daughter in the visit in front of the officer, and I told her, tell Céline that if she heard anything about releasing my nationality, tell her that this is a lie, that I was never approached officially by it, and I will never accept it. To send them a message, because they were sitting in the room, to know that I will never accept that. Unfortunately, what happened in the last few months is the following. One, my father got sick, and I started getting worried about losing him. And yes, this is the worst thing that can happen to a detainee, is losing his close family members while being in jail. And second, the Egyptian authorities started saying clearly, not only to me, but even to official delegations like French parliamentarian delegations and French official delegations, and even to Anwar Sadat and others, that tell Ramy clearly, bluntly, he will not be released unless he renounces his nationality. So it was a clear case of blackmail that was known even to other parties, international parties involved, that they were blackmailing me. And finally, it started in early December that they came in to my jail, met me, and started saying, we know that you have passed the 2 years mark, but we don't care. We can keep you forever. We can recycle you in another case. Your only way out is to renounce your nationality, and we'll get you out of the country. We don't want you to remain in the streets in Cairo. And eventually, that's what we had to do. I had a case, by the way, on the administrative court that is 11 years old, that I made against the state in 2011, 2012, against state security. And I won the case in 2012. And they argue in that case trying to relinquish my nationality, and they lost the case. And then 3 years later, after the coup, they came up back with an appeal on that case, which was very weird. How do you appeal a case after 3 years of its settlement? But well, there is no real judiciary system in Egypt. So they started the case again. And it went from 2015 being delayed case by case for 16 times till the 25th of December 2021, where they insisted in the negotiations that I have to close this case because it was embarrassing for them that I won a case against state security, that I will not leave jail unless I renounce my nationality, and using the renunciation of my nationality as a way to close the case that I won against them and against state security. In short, yes, I unfortunately was blackmailed to do that. It was not my idea, and the country, I resisted it for more than a year. And I'm sorry, I will never accept the fact that under those conditions, that will be called a renunciation of nationality. I will never accept the fact that what they're trying to tell me is you're either Egyptian or you're free. I insist of being Egyptian, and I insist of being free. And this is the right for all Egyptians to do so. And I will get my nationality, whether now or later, regardless of what they think.
Absolutely, thank you. We have another question from the audience, so it looks like we're getting some audience engagement. How do you think the younger generation, so people, those who grew up sort of post 2011, can connect to or learn from the longer history of organizing and activism in Egypt, especially given the fact that, like you said, the civic space has been shrunk a lot, and even some might say closed?
Yes, I mean, for me, the whole beauty of the revolution in 2011, not that we won the revolution, unfortunately we didn't. The military council remained after Mubarak, and that's what led the country till the coup in 2013. But the beauty of that period of 2.5 years of the revolution is that allowed us to open up the civic space. It allowed us to talk to people in the streets. It allowed us to meet people in squares and organize and talk politics and discuss opinions and get ideologies closer and have a unified vision of the future. And that's exactly why the military wanted quickly to end this revolution, even though they had to let Mubarak go in an attempt to keep the regime intact and alive. And in doing so, by closing back the civic space that allowed people to see each other, meet and talk. But always we can do that. Whatever those goons do to us and whatever barriers they put, there is always ways and spaces we can talk. There is internet, there is virtual, but there is also common understanding, common experience. Yes, I should write more about my experience so people can see what they did. And I've been reading other people's experience. I am telling the lady that asked this question, please read the Ala Abdel Fattah new book. It is a marvelous experience and writings from 2011 till now. So you'll understand a lot of his visions, of his attitude, and of his experience in the revolution and in jail. So yes, there is definitely many ways that we have to be innovative to break those barriers and regroup and re-understand our mutual rights and our mutual future.
I want to pick up on that a little bit. You know, the ideas in Elat's book and this idea of the sort of role of the younger generation of organizers, like what in your mind is a vision of the future for Egypt? Do you see any openings or any space for greater freedom? And if so, do you think that that's something that could be generated from within the country, or that's something that will be generated from those who are outside? Just any reflections that you might have on what the future could hold.
I personally have absolutely no doubt about the future. I have no doubt that our right cause will win, that Egypt will transform into a more civilized state, an actual state, not a gangster tactics that this regime deals with. I believe that this is going to happen, and I believe what happened is in 2011 was just a first wave of change that's going to happen to Egypt. It opened a door of people talking, of people thinking. Today, people, nevertheless, scared of reprisal and scared of the regime's tactics, but they're still engaged in the civic space. They're still engaged in the public issues. And that was never the case during the Mubarak period. People were completely outside the picture. And yes, the change is going to happen. It's difficult. We have a long history of reprisal. We have a history of occupation in Egypt for hundreds of years, and then a history of military control after the end of old colonialism. And this ought to change. Unfortunately, we were late 100 years or more from Europe and from the rest of the world, but this is going to happen. Egyptian people has a lot of educated people, had a lot of brains, had a lot of courage, had a lot of love to their country, and this is going to happen eventually, and especially with the new generation. You know, I have seen the split happening in parties and in ideological frameworks, not only on the basis of ideology and on politics and in social, but also on generational issue. There is a new generation in every ideology and in every party and in every discourse that completely lost relation with this older generation, lost relation with the way they treat politics, lost relation to the way they deal with each other, even as an opposition, lost relation to their old themes and old ways and old tactics. New generation has Facebook, has internet, has quick relations to each other. They have seen the world, they have known that the rest of the world lives in a different way, lives in a more respectable way, lives in a more civilized way, and they demand that in Egypt, and they're gonna get it. It's a matter of time that this generation becomes more and more the majority that imposes change, whether the military like it or who else like it or not. I am 100% sure the change is coming, and I think it's coming very quickly. I'm seeing the effect of the corruption and bad management on the Egyptian economy. I've seen the effect of suppression on people and the political and social bases, and those issues are growing to explode and change Egypt very soon.
So a wonderful answer. Thank you, Ramy. It's very, very inspiring. Your faith is very inspiring.
And
Please,
if I can give like a very concrete example that happened just a few days ago to show a bit what Ramy is talking about. Like a few days ago, just around the commemoration of the Sinai liberation, Egyptians discovered that there were like 2 or 3 Israeli festivals being organized in Sinai, and this generated a huge uproar among the Egyptian society, and especially youth who actually took it upon themselves to go and downgrade the review of the hotel that was hosting one of those festivals. And actually in just a few days of young dedicated youth, the administration of the hotel announced that it was not hosting the festival anymore, and a hotel that is owned by the army. So we can see that obviously social media is not the same as organizing on the ground, but there is a young generation that is politicized, that is aware of what's happening, and that uses the tools at their disposal in the current situation to still have an impact, as minimal or big as it is. And it is very encouraging for the future.
I'm really glad you brought up that example, actually, because it's a really nice segue into sort of the next audience question, which is, what is the status of BDS and Palestine activism in Egypt today and after Ramy's arrest?
Well, definitely since my arrest, things have slowed down, especially that few months after my arrest, they arrested my deputy as a coordinator. Of course, people had to be more careful, but they never stopped. They continued even in harsh times, sometimes with lower pace, sometimes with higher pace. And definitely with the last fight, like Céline said, on the festivals in Sinai, the growth of BDS went back on, and their approach and people connecting with them start growing. We've been having hundreds of new individuals trying to join the movement every single month. Definitely, personally, I am, since my arrest and since my deportation after my release, I am outside of Egypt. So I am no more in BDS Egypt. There is a lot of youth and a lot of the younger generation that are taking the call, and they are continuing the movement. And I think it's growing in Egypt, and it's going to grow even more, even with difficult times.
I'm hoping to ask you both. I mean, obviously at the Freedom Initiative, we are convinced that the issue of detention and imprisonment, not just of traditional political prisoners, but the undermining of rule of law in such a way to arrest a whole range of, from businessmen to folks from LGBTQ community to organizers like yourself is a very clear tactic that the regime is using to try to break the sort of enthusiasm that you're talking about, to break the ability to organize across generations. I'm curious to hear from you. Obviously you were detained, and Céline, you were the wife of a detainee, but also as human rights defenders, why is this issue so important, and why do you think that this is an issue that's important, for instance, for the audience to mobilize around as a pathway towards human rights and democracy?
And I personally, I think that the fight for detainees and the bigger fight for the end of the fear tactics that the Egyptian authorities used against Egyptians in every way, in their life, in their social life, in their economic life, and politically, is the key to democratic transformation, is the key for real governance. We cannot really address elections today with a regime that suppresses freedom of speech. We cannot address elections with a regime that censors media and confiscates media and owns it by its security apparatus. We cannot talk about elections when a time when parties are scared to even have an event in their party because people will get arrested afterwards. So yes, the key for change in Egypt is to end the issue of human rights abuses and to end the laws that cripples people's ability to express themselves. Yes, for me, the issue of detainees is a moral issue. It's a principled issue, but also it's a mean for a bigger goal, which is transforming Egypt. So yes, I call on people to hold on to this issue and unify and organize. We have to end this crisis as a way to end misery of thousands of Egyptians, innocent ones that have been thrown in jails, but also as a way and a key for real change in Egypt in the future.
And another question along that, and I know that, Ramy, this was something that we discussed quite a lot during the campaign for your freedom, and it's also something that's widely discussed amongst civil society and human rights defenders. How do we conceive of advocating on behalf of individual prisoners' cases when we know that there are tens of thousands who are detained? How do we use the stories of folks like yourself to tell the stories of those who maybe don't have a global campaign that are mobilized around them? And do you have any reflections on that?
Yes, it's okay. Let me start by saying that thank God that this regime is stupid enough to arrest well-known politicians, well-known activists, and well-known journalists, and well-known lawyers, because that exposed the suppression that he's been doing for the last 8 years. At periods, he was arresting many people who are not known to the public, who are not known to the world. And unfortunately, at points, he was successful in selling to the world that he's fighting terrorism. But after he started arresting well-known politicians, activists, lawyers, in every way, people started realizing, come on, we know those people, none of those can be a terrorist. And then started realizing that the whole case is shameful, that there is actually a very small minority that is less than 1% of detainees that might be involved in violence, but the rest of the people are basically arrested for their political opinion. They're arrested because they want to scare the whole nation from talking or moving. I have seen people from every district of Egypt, from every village from Egypt, from every social class from Egypt, from businessmen to extremely poor people. And this is a message that, do you know this guy who is your neighbor or your friend or your relative or your co-worker that have done nothing in life and he's a very nice guy? We arrest him and we destroy his life. So what if you try to speak? What if you try to express yourself? What if you try to oppose the government? What we're going to do to you? This is the message. But let me tell you, the continuation of this suppression, the rising amount of detainees that is reaching 60,000 is actually telling me that all his tactics are not working, that he's still scared, that he's still weak, that he still realizes that the people are ready to change the court and the situation. And our job today as free people, I mean, i.e. not in jail, and free people, i.e. that we believe in freedom and we believe in those principles, is to fight to support those ones who are still in jail, to get them out. And maybe it will be a beginning of change in Egypt.
Thank you so much. And we're here again with Ramy Shaath and Céline Lebrun-Shaath. If folks have any more questions, we have just a few more minutes left with them. And you can add your questions in the comment section or in the chat section. As we're waiting to see if there are any more questions from the audience, Céline and Ramy, if you have any sort of parting thoughts that you'd like to leave folks with, would love to hear this.
Let me tell you, yes, there are known activists, and it may be important to have this individual campaigns to show the people a face and a human interaction, because every single human being that is being thrown in those jail is a human being, is a life, is a family that is destroyed, is a sorrow, feelings and disparity. So when you make individual campaigns, it gives a name and a face to those 60,000, but our fight should be the whole 60,000. Our fight should be freedom and justice for everybody. I call on people to keep vigilant, to keep fighting, to keep organizing, to keep around institutions like yourself and Freedom Initiatives and others that can play a bigger role in changing the situation and in support to detainees, whether in jail or outside when they're out.
And that, to add, like, this is something we've always been careful and mindful about whenever we were campaigning for Ramy. It was never just about Ramy. We always asked the release of Ramy and political prisoners in Egypt. And we led many actions that actually were talking about many, many cases. And we are continuing today. So hopefully with you all. And we should not, and it's very important, especially at the time when we're seeing releases of high-profile activists' names, in the hope maybe by the regime that those names would be enough and that we will like say, okay, and forget about the ones without a name, without a high profile. So we need to keep our demand very clear for the release of all political prisoners.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment to end on, and so poignant, and it means so much to see the two of you together and hear that from you both. Ramy, it's great to have you back in freedom, joining the fight to release all political prisoners, anybody who is wrongfully detained. And thanks so much to everybody who's joined us in all your efforts.
Thank you, and thank you for your audience.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.